All right, so start letting people into the webinar. Welcome to Powerhouse Arena's virtual events. My name is Chris, I'm the events coordinator here. And tonight we are thrilled to be hosting the Lunachicks and Jeanne for the launch of their book, Fallopian Rhapsody. I'm sharing a link to buy a signed copy of the book in the chat right now. All copies bought through Powerhouse will be signed, and they have just been signed. The Lunachicks came in earlier today to personally sign the books. And tonight they'll be in conversation with Jeanne Eliscu. If you have any questions, you can use chat or Q&A, and they'll take your questions at the end of the event. And I'll introduce everyone now. Jeanne Eliscu is a radio host for Sirius XM. Jeanne Fury is a music journalist who's been published in Village Voice, Billboard, Entertainment Weekly, RollingStone.com, Spin.com, and elsewhere. And she contributed to Women Who Rock, as did frontwoman Theo Kogan. And finally, the Lunachicks released 6 albums and toured internationally for over 13 years. The New York Times has described them as feminist, trashy, righteous, foul-mouthed, and certainly fun. All right, I'll hand it over, and thank you.
Thank you. It's good we start with a motorcycle sound right at the very beginning there. Hi, y'all. Good to see you.
Hi. Thank you for joining us.
Oh my gosh, I was going to say album release day. Does it kind of feel like an album release day a little bit?
Kind of,
yeah. Yeah, it's a culmination. Happy book release day. Fallopian Rhapsody is out now. And for those in the chat, I see you going off over there. I'm going to just kind of blind myself to that for now, and just for what it's worth. The chicks, they can't see what you're saying in the chat. So if you're trying to catch their attention, unfortunately, that's not going to happen. But except for the later portion, we'll get to like the second half, and then I'll comb through and pick just the most brilliant questions that I have not yet thought of myself. But I was so excited when Jeanne reached out to me to ask me to do this. And, you know, as someone who grew up getting into punk rock music in New York, gal myself from the outer boroughs who loves tattoos and thrifting and fart jokes, I can't believe we hadn't sort of met before. So it's great to be able to be brought together with you all this way. So thanks, Jeanne, for inviting me to moderate this conversation. And I want to start by asking you to talk about just how did this book idea arise, and how did it come together?
I had started working with Theo on a separate project prior to this, and I was at work one day. We'd worked on it on and off. I was at work one day and I got a phone call, and it was Theo, and she said, "We're ready." And I said, "For what?" "What do you mean?" And she said, "The band, we're ready to do the book." And I was like, "Holy shit, we're going to do a Lunachicks book." And
because it had been an idea. It had been an idea. You had suggested this in the past.
Yeah, we had talked about it, and it was, you know, people's lives were busy raising children and running businesses and working on other projects. So to actually get that call that was like, okay, no, for real, full steam ahead. Yeah, it's awesome.
So what inspired the choice to do it now?
I mean, me and Jeanne had been working on a memoir for me before I had a kid, and that all went to pot. Hi, Lucy. And and then I don't know. The three of us were talking, and I just felt like it was time to ask them if they wanted to do it. Jeanne was game, so.
So how did you, what did the process look like at the beginning? And was there a lot of, I mean, how much of it involved jogging your own memories about shit? Because I would imagine there's some things you remember right away, crystal clear, but then maybe when you consult with each other, you're like, oh, I was wrong about that. Like the outfit with the sailboats on it or whatever.
Not an outfit, just a t-shirt.
It was an outfit.
To be clear.
It was an outfit.
Well, we definitely decided that would be the best part of the book, is that everybody remembered everything differently, and that would just be so awesome to have different voices telling the same story in a totally different way. So
what would you would just get together, Jeanne, tell me about what happened. How did you figure it out?
we would get to, it was hours and hours and hours of interviews. And we'd all get together and we would snack hardcore. Snacking was so integral to writing this book.
Lots of eating.
So much eating. All the transcriptions I have is like chewing and stories and laughing. So much chewing, like crunch, crunch, crunch. And then I sent it to Theo.
And crunch, crunch, crunch.
But yes, we hung out a lot, which I think was maybe part of the motivation to do this book in the first place.
Yeah, it didn't feel like we were writing a book. It was more that we were just going out to dinner or going to Jeanne's house and eating as much as humanly possible and just hanging out and rehashing old stories. But then, of course, Jeanne did all the work of having to transcribe that in between chewing and crumbs and what have you.
I mean, it gave us an excuse to hang out, and we're always down for an excuse to hang out. So, true.
Right. Yeah. And how many hours would you estimate? And over what period of, like, when did that start? And compared to where we are now in 2021?
Years.
How many faces can I make?
Yeah. How many years?
Are you you're kombucha girl? You're doing kombucha girl gif right now.
Yeah, I am. That's exactly what I'm doing.
2015?
Let's go with 5 or 6.
If we finished it last year, that's fine.
Okay.
But you guys, so you guys still hang out all the time. I mean, do you guys, was there sort of, did this kind of create a, as they say, renaissance amongst you?
It kind of did, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, everybody's just busy. You know, it's hard to, say, it's hard to make time to see your friends. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. So it's like, best way to see your friends is like start a business with them or like, let's work out together, or let's do a project together, because it just gives you, you can like get 2 things done at one time. So it's just easy for us to, it just made perfect sense because whatever, we love to hang out, but we were just busy doing other stuff. So it gave us like a perfect reason to snack and talk and, talk about all these old stories that we've just been, sharing for years anyway.
And yeah, to have it must have been interesting to have a more kind of mature, no offense, version of working on a project together than where you're just like, okay, no, we're gonna really do this really clear-eyed,
But I gotta hand it to Jeanne though. I mean, wrangling the 3 of us and all of our opinions and all of our talking and all of our thoughts about things, and I couldn't imagine doing this with anybody other than Jeanne, because who has that kind of patience?
Yeah, the patience and
It's pretty amazing.
The like not being beholden to what was written, and if we were like, I don't like that part that I wrote about, whatever, and then she's just like, take it out. She's like that cool,
Yeah. What were the things that kind of came back in clear detail first that you were most initially excited to remember more of?
Well, certainly the opening story, I would say, right?
I had kind of forgotten about that.
Oh. Okay, never mind.
No, but it came back.
Yeah.
It came back as we were writing. I was like, oh.
Yeah. For people who haven't yet cracked the book, the opening, do you want to say what the opening story is?
The opening story is when we were playing in this club sort of on the outside of London and discovered that the promoter / owner of the club had a 2-way mirror into our dressing room and had been watching us and bringing other guys in to watch us change all night long. So if you can sort of imagine in your mind what might have happened after we found out, you probably are imagining correctly, and maybe not.
Read the book.
Read the book.
Yeah, and from there, and we're gonna not spoil too much of the book for people because we want you to read it, but we want to take you through some of it so you know what you're in for. And from there, it's interesting because then your separate biographies are explored a bit before we get into, and it's not very long before some of you meet each other in those stories. But I thought it was really interesting as someone, like we're in the same generation. I'm from New York originally myself, and to see the similarities of like the kind of households, the kind of like difference in values between our parents' generation and ours. And if you were kind of like a weirdo with proximity to like the city, like a lot, you could really get into a lot of stuff. I remember my mom would always say, are you going to go all the way into the city now?
Like, all the way.
I'm going all the way now. Not going to stop halfway and come back. But yeah, I'm curious to hear any of you talk about just kind of like looking back as you were doing this process, like what you kind of realized about how the way that you grew up was an influence on the band you ended up in.
Okay. First of all, I grew up in suburbia as a young kid, and then I moved to the city right before 7th grade started. So I had this like crazy culture shock. And all of a sudden, I found myself being able to get on the subway, go somewhere, and meet people and do things. I had this autonomy that I think that that doesn't exist really if you don't live in a place with a subway system or a bus system like ours, that you could just take yourself wherever you want. And so there, and then meet people you wouldn't normally meet. So that was one of the coolest things about being a city kid, is just having that kind of freedom and independence.
Yeah, and so, but you, like I say, you guys met each other or in different combinations pretty early on, and obviously when you're a kid, you don't overthink too much what it is that draws you to a person or something like that. But in retrospect, what do you think it is that drew you to each other as like actual children?
Oh my God. Well, Sid was like
Definitely the high waters.
Sid was like the cool girl, and I was like this, I was there in school. We met in 8th grade for the one year, and everybody else in school had been there like their whole lives. And she kept giving me nasty looks, and then finally she started talking to me, and I was like, the cool girl's talking to me. And then she was like, I like her. I'm going to put her in my dance. She was choreographing. How many dances did you choreograph?
I don't know, a lot. Anything to get out of gym class.
And it was, because we both hated gym. And then she put me in her Dance to Freeze frame by Jay Giles band. And that was where our love story began.
Love story. I missed that chapter. I didn't catch up to them until 9th grade.
Well, I met Gina in the sailboat outfit.
We were like old.
Sailboat shirts, just setting the record straight, shirts,
Outfit.
dementia. Hey!
Honestly, maybe my favorite part of the book, like reading back on it, and it's just the parts where we met and we were so young in junior high school. It's so fun. And actually, like, having kids that are that age now, and like just watching the ups and downs of the friendships and the crazy, junior high school, like, torture. Like, I've never reflected more than I am now on how incredibly lucky we were to find each other. And it's like, once we grabbed on, we just never let go. So
Yeah, I don't know how many people have who are still that close with people that they knew that long ago. I think especially in a city like New York, where there are so many newcomers and people leaving all the time, it's easy to like lose, even if you're from here and have people have stuck around, eventually it's easy to fall out of touch. To be able to keep that going for that entire time is just such a blessing to have, and I would imagine that it takes sometimes doing something like this to look at it that way.
Yeah.
I lost my video of you for a minute. Sorry, I had a momentary panic. I was like, oh God, where did they go? Come back to me. Come back. I know I said I was the one ahead of it. I was like, don't panic if the video goes out. But I can't even take oh, thank you, sweet. I'm a professional. I was asking sort of earlier about growing up in New York, but let's talk a little bit about kind of the influence of just music in New York and the kind of music that was, slightly farther ahead on the track than you were when you started playing shows, the bands that, because they got bigger and bigger shows, kind of inspired you to keep booking your own. Who were some of the bands that you still think of that maybe were lost to time, but like you wouldn't have done it without them?
Definitely like the Freaks and the Willies and Lynn Vaughn and I think about Raging Slab, and who else do we play with all the time? Brain fart now. She,
I mean, it's interesting nowadays. It's interesting to think about nowadays. You know, obviously, this is all happening pre-internet, which I think is an important thing to remind anyone who's forgotten. Where nowadays, every way you book the booking of the promoting your show, all of it, you know, is so much different. I don't want to say easier, but different because of the internet. But I mean, did you even have that sense of ambition as actual teenagers? Because as I'm reading the book, by the time you're in the studio, you know, and that kind of thing, it's like it's easy to forget that you're still just teenagers because so much has already happened in the book and because you've already known each other for a minute. And then it's like, oh yeah, they're going buck wild in the studio because they're actual just teenagers, you know. But at that time when things were starting to happen, did you feel like, okay, this is New York City, we can do it, we can make this into a real thing?
Yes. I mean, yeah. We made the decision to start a band, and not with the idea that anything would happen except for us trying to make good music because we had good taste. And then we just went for it like full throttle, like we do with everything. Yes.
We were obsessed with music, obsessed with going to see bands live. It was just such a part of our lives, listening to other people make music and collecting music and trading records and turning each other on to bands that we like or bands we've discovered. So it was just a natural progression that, you know, why wouldn't we do this ourselves? And just like Theo said, not with any intent that it would last this long. And thank God it has. But, you know, let's just do it and see where it takes us. And here we are.
I mean, I think it's important to remember that the bands that we knew and people that were making that kind of music, nobody was making money. I mean, the goal was just to play with other people that we knew that were playing because they were, you know, a few years older than us and totally egging us on. Like, yeah, if you guys start a band, we'll let you play with us. So we were like, cool. Yeah. So that was really the goal, was just to like, we were already at the shows in the audience, just like, you know, how many songs do we need? You know, 8 songs. Can we write 8 songs? Like, fuck it. And then we can get up and it'll be our turn and we get to play with our friends, you know? So, I mean, it didn't really go any further than that type of entertainment at the time. I mean, we had absolutely no idea that we would end up recording or touring, or, you know, not back in those days. It was just something to do, really.
My computer is moving gradually closer to me, and so I'm getting closer to you. Reading about the first show at CB's was awesome, and just like you forget about the audition thing, you know, like the CB's had you had to audition to get your show, which in a way, you know, I can't believe venues don't do this nowadays. Just call your first show your audition, and it's like, nope, not enough people came. But tell us a bit, what you remember most about that night, and a little bit about how it sparked off the relationship with Louise. That sounds like it was such a great bond to have.
My favorite thing about that show was the audience. Like, because all of our friends really, we begged everybody we knew. We were like, please, it's our audition. It's a big deal. You have to be there. And they all showed up and they went crazy. And it was actually a really fun night. So that's my biggest memory of that. It's just all of our friends in the audience going crazy for us and really showing up for us and making it possible that we could start playing there regularly.
Thanks, everybody.
The point about Louise in the book was one of my favorite things because it's, you know, you go to CBGBs as a kid, you don't realize that there's one person who's like a gatekeeper, and it's this woman, and she's terrifying, but she loved them. She ignored them at first, but then she loved them, and I was like, this is the girl story.
She was like, to illustrate, like one of those people where you're like, you could crack like your best like fun joke, like sometimes, you know, I still do that when I go places, and people are just like, they're not gonna crack no matter what you do or say or how nice you are, and that was Louise. And then we cracked. She was tough. Yeah.
And nobody ever talks about Louise, and everybody knew her. Every single band that played at CB's had to go through her, so everybody in the New York music scene that ever played there knows her. And it was like, we get to immortalize her in our book.
I know it's unfortunate like that, those classic venues are just gone now, and there's nothing like a CB's, that kind of like disgusting place that just never changes. The only thing that changes is like the layer of stickers over the previous layer of stickers, and everybody else is trying to micro brew everyone else out of business or something nowadays, or have it just like the most sleek thing possible, and thereby make even more of the precious. I was fascinated to read about your experiences touring when it started to reach a more national scale here in the US, after initially being embraced, more so in the UK and overseas. When you started to get to tour the US more often, you were hearing that there was a quota sort of female dominated bands, or bands with female voices, that radio stations and what have you had filled their quota with another artist with a female voice, a band with a female voice, or female band. And yeah, I just love to hear you talk a little bit about kind of when that kind of dawned on you that was what was going on, and if you think it would be different nowadays.
It actually started in Europe, just for clarification.
Okay.
The first big conversation we had, we were on that silly boat in the Thames, right? That was the first time I remember really talking, like hearing back about like why we were driving in these crazy directions all over Europe instead of, because Babes in Toyland and Hole were both on tour in Europe at the same time, and we were all there together, and so our tour was getting rerouted into all these wacky routes, and that's when the whole thing first started. And I remember like we were just like could not even wrap our brains around what was happening.
But here too, I think once you sort of like, you're used to being on like the cool college radio stations and stuff like that back then, before there was internet radio, and then the next thing you're like trying to get on a major radio station, and they're saying no, we only play one female fronted or female rock band a month or a week or a day or whatever it is. Then that's like, say what? Like what? It just doesn't. It still boggles the mind.
I hope that it's different now.
I don't know.
I don't know if it is, but I should think that it would be, because I think there's so many more women in music now. So back then it was still seen as a novelty, like oh, all girl band playing all girl music, almost like we were a sideshow, and you don't book the sideshow, they only book a sideshow once a month. You don't want too many crazy novelty acts happening at your club.
Well, and you're really
insane. Yeah, no, take it. I'm handing it over.
Just thinking about, the bottom line of that is like, there are a bunch of guy bands every single night in these places, every week, every year, every month. And basically it was like, do you want the vaginas or do you want the, you know what I mean? Like, we can't have too many vaginas in one month. Not too many vaginas.
Yeah, and it's like rock. It's also like a rock. It's like a rock thing. I think in retrospect, looking at it, at least for myself, when I think about changes since then, or progress since then, or just sort of underground music, changes in underground music since then, I think it probably still is a big problem for actual rock bands with women in them, especially if all of the members are women, that they probably still get pigeonholed that way, because there's still this sense that like girls can't really rock or something, that it's an anomaly or that it's exotic, versus all other genres of music where people don't, I don't think anymore, like make a big deal about it, a pop channel or whatever. It's still just like women doing rock, that's so niche. It's like, what? Why is that? What the fuck?
Yeah, why is that still a thing? Why is it still a problem? I would really like to get to the bottom of this. Can you tell me?
Yeah, it feels like men need to own rock as a and just like they need to own masculinity or something. And it's like, give us some.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can't have been thinking about those issues the same way then as you think about them now. I mean, do you feel like, whether it's on the question of feminism or any of these things, like that you deeply revisited in the process of making this book, like, did you really feel a sense of like new understanding about things, or just sort of like, wow, we didn't even think about it that way back then?
A lot of that happened for sure.
I had a moment realizing that we were a band that went to art school, that I never thought, like, we're an art school band. That came to me. And also that we got our first record deal after our, third show, second show. It never hit me that way.
Yeah, you could see the pieces sort of like click into place. That was a really interesting part of the whole process was, having the retrospect, like being able to look back and be like, oh, I see what was going on there, and like putting it together and, having new opinions and newfound knowledge of what exactly was going on. And yeah, that was super interesting for all of us.
I think that happened a lot, especially with like the fashion and the subversive, like a lot of the messaging that we were sending, because none of that was conscious at the time. It was just a good, we'd be like, I have this idea, I'm gonna wear my underwear on the outside of my clothes, and it was no like deep concept and the whole feminist, angle of the band. I mean, I don't think we ever had one conversation about included the word feminism at any time during that. We were just doing what we were doing because that's how we were living, and then we were just doing it until the outfits on stage. And I think that we didn't even realize. I think writing the book really gave us insight into what was driving us in a whole new way, starting from how we were raised and with our families and all that stuff that just didn't occur to us at the time. It just felt like the next good idea, but looking back on it, it's like it makes a lot of sense. And then we were able to put a lot of those pieces together in the book, which was fun for us, I think. It's like discovery. Mm-hmm.
Were there places that you didn't think you were going to necessarily be willing to go, or Jeanne, where you feel like you had to kind of, coax or give a pep talk into being more willing to share personal details? Because, again, no spoilers, but, the book, in addition to going into your story together, goes into your individual struggles. And I know that from reading some of your notes about it, that this was how, some of you kind of became aware of what the others of you were going through in your own private way at the time. So, I mean, surely there must have been moments where you're like, am I gonna talk about that, or am I gonna just leave that for a bit longer?
I think that when one of them would tell one story, that the trust was established, and then the next person would tell a story. And the next person. I think once, not that they ever doubted the trust in each other, but I think that having such a strong foundation, there was real support throughout some of the harder stuff to write and talk about. That I don't think it wouldn't have been the same with a different band. I really feel like their sisterhood and their bond made for that sort of doorway to be explored.
We egg each other on.
And you egg each other on.
Like if she's doing it, I'll do it. So definitely we were like triggering each other to go deeper. I think that happened a lot while we were writing.
It definitely happened for me with my default nature, because I'm just a little shy and a little cautious.
She's
and
the
then
Italian one, not the Jew. So.
And then I'm like, wait a minute, Sid can write that. Well, of course I can talk about it. Sid can talk about that, then I can talk about this. Come on.
If Gina can play 6 strings, I can play 4. I mean, what's the big deal? So, logic.
I'm going to, in just a sec, take some of these questions from y'all. So if you've been holding a question, fire away, and I'll scroll through those. But before, as we get into that, and I give you guys some time in the chat to type in some questions, talk a bit about the role of humor in the band and in the process of this book. When I asked you guys for notes, everyone said the laughs.
Yeah, a lot of laughs.
Need we say more?
I crack myself up. Let me see. I mean, leave Jeanne. I mean, that's how we started. We started by making each other laugh, and it's what is better than that, as for a friendship. And then when exactly. And we kind of lived to crack each other up, and then and then it just continued. And when we go into rehearsal now, we are rehearsing for our shows coming up. And when we go in there, we just crack each other up.
And I will say every member too, not just the
Yes.
three of us. I mean, Cindy, Becky, Chip, like, it's like if you're not funny, you can't be in the band.
Yeah.
Basically, if you don't have a sense of humor. And we've never had a band member that was, well.
Let me see if any of these questions can make us laugh, but not too hard. Okay, well, first, people are asking, of course, understandably, about what the plans are. That's something I should ask as well before we get into some more of these. Not just specifically, hello, Lucy, do you have any plans to play the UK/Europe, or that touring wherever it might be, and these shows that you would have played if not for COVID? Those are going to happen. Tell us about that.
We're playing punk rock bowling in Las Vegas in September on the 25th. I want to say
Something like that.
26th. punkrockbowling.com. And then we are playing the shows that we were supposed to play before COVID, the weekend of Thanksgiving this year, November.
The Friday and
Yeah.
Saturday after
The Friday and
Thanksgiving
Saturday
weekend.
after Thanksgiving in New
At
York.
Webster Hall.
At Webster Hall. Tickets will be honored if you have them from the year and a half ago. And we are talking about doing some other things following that. We don't have anything planned at the moment, but we are in talks about doing possibly in Europe and the UK. We don't know, but
We ain't got a plan. We're working on it though. Working
Yeah,
on
I mean, we were supposed to be doing a lot of dates in support of the book, along with the book tour, which we were supposed to be thanks to COVID.
Yeah.
So everything got pushed. So now, yesterday's dinner is today's dinner. Brunch. And we don't know.
And what about new music? Is that a thing that you're considering endeavoring to do if it feels good, or what's the vibe on that?
Don't know. Don't
Anything
know
is
yet.
possible. Anything's possible. Anything.
Okay, let's see. I'm
We talk
gonna
about lots of things, and some of them we do. So
We're
I
talking
like
about
this question. I like this question from Jenny Bell, not just because your name is Jenny. I like this question from you. There's a movement for women to rewild. I think that's a typo, but the gist of it is, I feel as a teenager, you gave me the outlet to be wild, funny, and angry. Great. How do you maintain that as women now? What lessons have continued to unfold from your time as Lunachicks?
Look at us. I mean, staying true to yourself and your integrity, certainly.
Yeah. Keeping your girls with you at all times.
Yes. Teaching your children to be strong and tough and travel in a pack. Kick them in the nuts.
Yeah, I mean, as you were saying earlier, Sid, specifically, like, yeah, having kids that are getting to be the ages that you were when you met each other, it must be really like a good kind of feedback mechanism for sort of staying in touch with who you were. And then because there must also be things where you see your kids do something that's quintessentially you, even if you're just like, I'm going to have to explain to them why that's counterproductive, but also I love that shit.
Yeah. There's so much that sometimes, like with my daughter, hi Lucy, that where not so much these days, but there have been many times when I'm like, I know she's doing something that I shouldn't think is funny, and I should be like, no, you can't do that, and then I'm like, I think it's hilarious.
Eileen here in the chat asks, Jeanne, Fury, when did you first hear Lunachicks? And yeah, and how did you guys decide Jeanne was the right person to do your book?
I first heard Lunachicks in 1995 because I went to the record store and found Jack of all trades, and this is in the book, and I looked at it and was like, holy shit, and turned it over and I went, holy shit, and then I ran to the counter and I said, please can I listen to this? They give me headphones, listen to the headphones, and I could not, I had been waiting for this to happen the whole time. I really everything about it. I brought it home and I played it to death. I absorbed it. And it really did change my life. Like not to be cliche or anything, but it absolutely did. Second part of the question you have to ask them. First of all, what more can you ask for from all?
Yeah.
Well, you had written, Jeanne had written a piece in, I can't remember what magazine it was, Decibel, about that experience of first putting on the entrees. And Jeanne is, I think, a brilliant writer and hilarious and just kind of one of us, cut from the same cloth. You have the same sense of humor. And so when we read this article about her experiencing Lunachicks for the first time, it was just like the greatest thing I ever read. And so I just couldn't imagine anybody else writing this story. I mean, Jeanne was made to write this. Yeah, definitely.
I love this question about whether you think that you would have had the freedom to be so open and experimental if social media had existed back then.
God, it's so complicated.
It's so hard to know.
Yeah. Do you guys, I know you guys have social media, obviously, for you have, Instagram and Twitter for the band and stuff like that, but do you fuck with it much, or are you like, it's a hellscape, get me out of here?
Both?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about it. But I mean, I use it a lot. I get to connect with friends, but also I'm always doing projects that I want to promote. So, but I can't, it was so different when we were, we had telephones with cords and smoke signals, and it was just
so much beepers.
Beepers. I paid for them. I had to pay for it. There's just so much information now. I don't know how kids navigate it. Like, we just fell into a certain, my sister had a punk rock record collection, so those were the 10 records I had, and it was that simple. Now the kids have access to literally everything and anything,
and they still don't know what's going on.
So I mean, obviously it would have been completely different, but then other different things happened, I guess, so we're excited that kids have what they have now. I mean, we were lucky, we were in the right place at the right time, we knew the right people, and we fell under a certain influence of what we had access to, and that is what pointed us in that direction and drove us. I mean, it was like that or whatever, Captain and Tennille, what else was on the radio at that time in the 70s and the 80s. So
I mean, going to a record store was so important then, and was such an incredible way to find things just visually at first, where you're like, what is that? Looking at like X-ray spectroscopy adolescence. I remember just being like, this looks so cool, like that, and having that large, space for the visuals. And now I feel like, I mean, even I've discovered weird music people online, but it's sort of harder to navigate because there's so much coming at you in a second. So it's like you really have to be able to weed through like, definitely.
Yeah, I like this question from Justin. It seems like the band took influence from the NY queer scene. Can you talk about how that inspired the band, about the drag scene and just being allies of the queer scene as well? Talk about the influence of that back then and now.
Well, I mean, Jane County for one, and we love Jane Sweetbox and all our friends from that club and that time. Even before that, our friends Guy and JoJo's party, we all worked there in some capacity, and sort of fell into that and didn't want to leave.
And there's so many creative people, artists in New York City, and so many queer artists that our worlds were always interchanging, and it was just kind of, that was home for us.
Yeah,
we felt the most comfortable.
We're adjacent, not more.
Do you think that, I'm sort of paraphrasing someone's question, but do you think that being kind of feeling like underdogs was a big motivation for you, or feeling like if it felt like people didn't get the joke sometimes, that motivated you more to take it to the next level?
I feel like maybe we didn't really care what, like, not that we didn't care, but we really did kind of live to amuse ourselves. And if you came along for the ride, great. But if you didn't get it, well, maybe it's just not your bag.
And confusing people is fun.
Yeah.
Throwing stuff
Yeah.
at the audience to fuck. I mean, we would say like fucking with people, but in like a fun way. But it was always about not giving people what they would expect. It was always about giving them the last thing that they would expect. And just throw something in there that makes absolutely no sense. Like hardcore scene in New York, and then we'd like show up in bras and underwear and tutus and black our teeth out, and like we would play hardcore faster than you. So it's just like. The opposite of this obvious kind of like super testosterone masculinity. Just anything that we could like get underneath and try to flip it upside down just to fuck with people's heads on stuff. That was just fun for us.
Well, and then we had this single, I can't remember if this was when it came on, where we put our heads on the bodies of different men in lingerie, and Chip even used her dog as her body.
This
and
is pre-Photoshop.
this is pre-Photoshop, so it was like cut and
I
paste
literally
Gina.
cut the heads off of the photographs and
With a
stuck
pair of
them.
scissors.
And then people thought we were actually men, and we're like, oh, they're drag queens, they're men. I feel like, yeah, Kevin Lyman, who's the guy from the Warped Tour, thought we were a bunch of dudes in drag, which is actually a very high compliment. And a dog in drag. I mean, but it's like, it boggles the mind that somebody would actually think that and cut and paste.
And
What?
before the internet, it was easy to confuse.
Before the internet.
It was easy to confuse people before the internet. I like this question from Karen about just your pursuits when the band went on its kind of unannounced long hiatus or whatever, and y'all started to do your separate pursuits. And the way Karen asks is what was it like finding yourself again, but I'm curious, like, what lessons as well you applied from your Lunachicks experience to your creative and professional endeavors since then.
A lot. We all discovered that we like to be our own bosses. That seems to be a running theme, right? You can say.
Yeah, but at the same time, you do, you do miss the collaboration that we had together. So it's a give and a take. It's one thing to have that kind of creative autonomy to do whatever you want to do, but at the same time, you're not collaborating with your favorite people in the world either. So it's it's kind of a little bit of both.
And stepping out into a world with other people that don't have your back in the same way was I had a pretty rough go for a few years there. Really feeling the loss of, I never having to think twice about the accounting being fair or like getting, whatever it is, like just like a trust of like family. And then, the world of a business owner and just realizing like not in Kansas anymore, and people don't have your back in that same way wherever you go. It's like you take it for granted. In some ways, I feel like we were so naive for so long because we were just mirroring off the relationship that we had with each other that it was intense to walk away from that and go into the real world, but just have different kinds of experiences with people in business and collaboration and projects. Not that we all haven't had successful collaborations since then, but there was a moment where I realized, like, wow, this is really different. It's not like guys,
Yeah, someone was asking, Anthony was asking for what your favorite Lunachicks album is and why. So I'd love if each of the three of you could talk about what your favorite Lunachicks album is and why.
I'd say Luxury Problem is mine.
Mine too, Luxury Problem. And I like Jerk. I like Jerk too.
I like bits of it.
Give me a little of the why. Give me a little of the old why.
Well, for Luxury Problem, that was our last album, and I felt at that point we had our shit together a little bit more. Like we knew what we were doing. We felt more confident in the studio and getting the sound that we want and in the way that we played. I just felt like we were just sharper and we had honed our skills, and so that's why I like that. I think it's just the production, the performance, and the songs are just, I think we kind of where we like hit our nice peak.
What have you found yourselves writing about in more recent years, and what, if there were ever to be new Lunachicks music, what do you think it would be about?
Well, we wrote before COVID, when we were getting ready to play, we wrote a fuck Trump song that was basically just said fuck Trump a whole lot of times.
That was the song.
But yeah, that that whole era of that 4 years of hell made me want to get up and scream more than just about anything all the time. So, yeah, I don't. We've been. Inside joke. Inside joke.
We've been playing with some songs, but I don't know if
They may not make it cut.
want to play them.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard for anything to get anyone as mad as Trump, but I'm sure there's plenty of things also to be pissed off, humorously pissed off about. Still plenty of things in 2021. Let me just see what else I have in the questions here before I get ready to wrap things up. So if you're holding back, now is the time. Greg asks about the biggest wardrobe malfunction on stage. Have there ever been any amusing wardrobe malfunctions?
There was one time that my hair, like my ball, got attached to Gina while we were like rocking out, and then I was stuck to her head. I mean, that's sort of like
It was so Spinal Tap.
It was very
The
Spinal Tap.
roadies had to come out and unstick us.
And yeah, this other times the hem, yeah. So I had these like big platform boots that I would jump around in, and I had this stretchy dress that David Dolan made for me, and I was jumping around, kicking my legs to the back, and then the heel of my boot got caught in the hem of the dress, and the whole dress went like wow, and then I went down. And I look around, and they're just like ah!
I laid on the floor and cried. I just cried.
That happened more than once. No.
Do you have much of the clothes from then do you still have?
We had some
Okay.
casualties. All our vinyl cheerleading outfits melted.
I took mine out and it melted. In fact, I took out our old backdrop yesterday to hang up behind us, but that also was moldy and melted.
Vinyl has an expiration date. Who knew?
A lot of my dresses, I'm sorry and proud to say, were so freaking smelly after the tour that even all the woolite in the world couldn't get the stain out. So some of those are gone, but there are plenty that we still have for the museum.
You have to call a certain special department here in New York City to get them to pick up your hazardous waste.
FEMA.
FEMA, those old Lunachicks outfits. I am going to wrap us up there, y'all. I didn't get to every question in the chat, but you know what? It's okay, you guys. We gotta wrap it up where it organically wraps up. I think you can all appreciate that about us, the five of us, and our state of mind. But there are a lot of people just thanking you emotionally and heartfelt thanks in the chat, and I hope you'll get a transcript of it, because people they love you all. They're being so awesome here.
Yeah, big giant hugs.
Yes, thank you for joining us.
Thank
Oh my
you.
gosh. Thank you all. Thank you all so much. The book is amazing, everyone. There's also, as Jeanne points out, Jeanne, say what we need to say about the audiobook and stuff like that. Jeanne,
Okay, if you thought this was funny, you got to get the audiobook because they read the whole thing. Every single person reads their part, and it is like tear-inducing funny. They do all their, all the sound effects, everything. It's just everything you want it to be. So there's the audiobook, and Powerhouse Arena has these signed copies.
Yeah, we signed them today. And one of them has a secret special thing, and you're very lucky you'll get that one.
ooh, Charlie and the
That's,
Fartlet Factory.
Yeah.
All right, I'll throw it over to you, Chris. Thanks so much, guys, again, and thanks to everyone in the audience for doing this. And that was an honor to be able to be here with you.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Get the audiobook and get the signed copies. Thank you so much to the Lunachicks, to Jeanne, Jenny, everyone who asked questions. You can buy a signed copy from us at the link in the event page.
Support your
And-
local bookstores.
Yeah.
Or your local bookstore. We still have some left. We sold a lot of copies during the event here, but here, I'll share the link one more time. But yeah, make sure to buy one. And if you missed any of the event for any reason, we'll have it on YouTube soon.
Yay.
Awesome.
Thank
See you in a
you.
bit.
Bye.
Bye.